Materials used in this presentation are period in nature and used for educational purposes only. Furthermore, when videos are used, they are utilized in conjunction with the photographs to produce continuity, in some instances are composites, and fall within the purview of the fair use doctrine of United States copyright laws. Attribution is given where required. For the better part of over 127 years, criminologists, historians, and true crime aficionados have found interest in the case of Lizzie Borden and the axe murders of August 4, 1892. Many believed in Lizzie's guilt and have presented several suspects who may have had a motive to murder Abby and Andrew Borden. Borden was a very wealthy man and miserly, to say the least. The family lived far within their means, and for some reason, one of Andrew's children felt cheated in a way. Was she capable of committing a brutal and some say rage-filled slaughter? On the muggy morning of August 4, 1892, Lizzie Borden discovered the battered body of her father, Andrew Borden, lying in a mangled disarray of bone and blood on the sitting room couch. It appeared that Andrew was caught off guard by the attack. Lizzie summoned the Borden's maid, Bridget Sullivan, also known as Maggie, after discovering her father's body, and ordered Sullivan to go and bring Dr. Seabury Bowen, Lizzie's doctor, and a neighbor named Adelaide Churchill to the house. Once the three were present at the Borden residence, Churchill and Sullivan walked up the staircase and noticed someone lying on the floor of one of the upstairs bedrooms. Churchill and Adelaide discovered the body of Abby Borden, her head bashed in as she appeared to be cleaning the bedroom upstairs. Dr. Bowen arrived as well and then immediately summoned the police to the Borden residence at 92 2nd Street, Fall River, Massachusetts. Once the police arrived, they made a search of the Borden residence for an intruder. They believe the killer may still be in the house. They also searched for a murder weapon and found 2 hatchets, 2 axes, and a hatchet head with a broken handle. The break in the handle appeared fresh, so authorities concluded that this must have been the murder weapon. Investigators found no blood on the implements, but only on the bodies themselves. As news of the murders spread throughout the small Massachusetts town of Fall River, crowds drew around the Borden residence and the murder scene quickly became contaminated with various people walking through the house as if the bodies were on display. Journalists invaded the residence and began speculating as to what exactly happened that morning. Additionally, the police allowed the family to clean the house as much as possible around their investigations. No one thought to examine anyone who was in the house at the time of the murders of blood-stained clothing or brain matter. Investigators quickly jumped to the conclusion that the murders had to be committed by someone within the house. Since Emma Borden, Lizzie's older sister, was away at a friend's house in Fairhaven, Massachusetts, she was eliminated as a suspect. Also, Maggie Sullivan, the maid, had been taking a nap, or so she claimed at the time the murders occurred. Focus soon zeroed in on Lizzie. 2 days subsequent to the murders, newspapers reported that Lizzie became the focus of the investigation, and rumors began to spread that she was in fact the murderer. When one examines the history of the Borden's relationship, looking through the lens of history, one can see the motive present that Lizzie possessed in seeing her father and stepmother dead. Lizzie was born on July 19, 1860 in Fall River, Massachusetts, to Sarah Anthony née Morse and Andrew Jackson Borden. This side of the Borden family did not exhibit the wealthy habits attributable to the other Bordens in Fall River. Andrew Borden worked hard his whole life as he did not benefit from the more affluent relatives. He started his career in building furniture and then, ironically, in coffins. He took the money he made from these ventures and dabbled in small real estate purchases, renting out the properties. Andrew Borden later went on to manage a bank, and at the time of his death, his fortune was valued at over $300,000, approximately equivalent to $10 million in today's economy. Although Andrew Borden could be considered rich by today's standards, considering his youth of hard work and toil, he was known to be very frugal. The home in which he lived at 92 2nd Street had no indoor plumbing or electricity, commodities that people with his wealth could afford very easily. Andrew's first wife, Sarah, passed away when Lizzie reached 2 years of age. Sarah made Emma, Lizzie's older sister by 10 years, promise to take care of her younger sister. Emma dutifully agreed. 3 years after Sarah's death, Andrew Borden married Abby Durfee Gray, a marriage that Lizzie believed Abby engaged in order to get at her father's wealth. Lizzie never warmed up to Abby, and later in their relationship, closer to the time of the murders, called her, quote, Mrs. Borden, end quote, instead of mother, and the relationship between the two was frosty at best. Maggie Sullivan stated later that Emma and Lizzie rarely ate their meals with Andrew and Abby. Emma and Lizzie drew ire over their father's, quote, gifts, end quote, of real estate to various members of Abby's family, including the giving of a house to Abby's sister. To quell the rumblings within the family, Andrew signed over a rental house to Emma and Lizzie, for which they purchased the house from their father for $1. A few weeks before the murder, the sisters sold the house back to their father for quite a handsome profit for the day, $5,000. Before the sale back to Andrew, Lizzie and Emma enjoyed the modest rental income the home generated, but this did not ease the tensions in the Borden household at all. In an effort to appease Lizzie in 1890, Andrew sent his daughter on a trip to Europe with some of the other Bordens from the, quote, the Hill, end quote, the ritzy part of town that the well-to-do Bordens inhabited. But Lizzie returned a little more frustrated at the way she lived compared to her wealthier cousins. After all, the trip to Europe was a highlight to Lizzie, as she didn't have much of a social life other than going to church and teaching Bible school, and both of the Borden sisters were cut off from the society of Fall River. Upon Lizzie's return from Europe, bizarre occurrences plagued the Borden household. In June 1891, someone robbed the house during the day when Andrew and Abby were not at home. Someone got into the house without alarming anyone, even though Lizzie, Emma, and Maggie never heard anyone entering or leaving the house. The intruder managed to get into Abby's desk and stole some cash, jewelry, and streetcar tickets. When the police arrived, Lizzie seemed relatively calm and led the police on a tour of the house, where she pointed out that a screen door had been torn with a nail. It appeared from the investigation that no one could have gained access to the house, and the police focused their investigation for the robbery upon Lizzie. From that point forward, all the doors of the Borden house were locked. Even Andrew locked his bedroom door every day. Common knowledge around Fall River implicated Lizzie as a shoplifter. Several instances occurred where Lizzie stole something, and the clerks would make a note of the merchandise taken, and Andrew Borden would render the money for the items at a later date. This did not erase the stigma Lizzie created by being labeled a kleptomaniac. Rumors also spread that Lizzie decapitated Abby's cat and that Andrew Borden sacrificed Lizzie's pigeons that she kept in a coop in the barn, but these have never been confirmed throughout history. In July of 1892, a huge family argument erupted that prompted Emma and Lizzie to take, quote, extended vacations, end quote, away from the family home. Emma returned to the family home a few days later, but Lizzie remained in a local rooming house until her return 4 days later, a week before the murders. Additionally, a few days before the murder, the family got ill from eating some bad food. Abby mentioned to a particular doctor that she believed someone was trying to poison the family. The Bordens recovered very quickly. The day before the murders, John Vennicum Morse, the brother of Emma and Lizzie's mother, Sarah, arrived and was invited to spend a few nights in the guest bedroom so that he and Andrew could discuss some business matters. On the morning of August 4th, 1892, Andrew, Abby, Lizzie, and Emma ate a breakfast of mutton soup, the third day the family ate this, quote, delicacy, end quote, for a meal. Andrew Borden then left the house at approximately 9 a.m. to start his workday. He returned to the Borden residence at approximately 10:45, and when he tried to use his key to open the door, he couldn't unlock the front door. Andrew knocked until finally Maggie opened the door from the inside. Andrew stated that he felt a little under the weather. When she let Andrew into the house, she heard Lizzie laughing. Maggie didn't see Lizzie, but believed she heard Lizzie at the top of the steps. Investigators considered this fact very significant because they believed, after the inquest, that Abby was already dead. Lizzie subsequently claimed that a messenger brought Abby a summons to visit a sick friend. Lizzie also claimed that when her father was on the couch in the sitting room, she helped him take off his boots and then replace them with his slippers, a fact later discounted from the crime scene photos. Andrew then went into the sitting room and laid upon the short couch for a nap before eating lunch. Maggie claimed she felt ill after being instructed to wash the windows on the inside and the outside. She was awakened at approximately 11:10 a.m. after going to lay down for a nap when she heard Lizzie call to her from the first floor saying, quote, "Maggie, come quick. Father's dead. Somebody came in and killed him." When Maggie went downstairs to answer Lizzie's call, she saw Andrew Borden lying on the couch in the sitting room, noticing his head looked like a mangled mess. When Maggie and Mrs. Churchill, the neighbor from next door, walked up the stairs at eye level, when they reached the landing of the second floor, they discovered Abby's body lying in the room where John Morse had spent the night. The police were finally called around 11:15 a.m. Police in Fall River had no experience with murder investigations. The most they had to deal with were prostitutes and drunks. Therefore, at the time of the Borden murders, the crime scene was trampled with curiosity seekers. It has been estimated that over 1,000 people gathered around the Borden home contaminating the crime scene. Photographs of the bodies were taken, and police conducted a search of the residence. But in 1892 Fall River, police dare not go through a woman's things looking for evidence. When questioned by the police at the residence, Lizzie was asked who may have murdered her father and mother. Lizzie immediately retorted, quote, "She's not my mother," end quote. Lizzie gave an account of her actions prior to the discovery of her father's body on the morning of the murders when she gave her statement to authorities.
Saw father when he returned from the post office. He sat down to read the paper. I went out to the barn, remained 20 minutes, returned and found him dead. Saw no one in the yard when going to or returning from the barn. Heard no noise whatever while in the barn.
1 week after Andrew and Abby Borden's death, W.A. Dolan, medical examiner for Fall River, along with his assistant, Dr. F.W. Draper, held the autopsies of the victims at the Oak Grove Cemetery, although there was a cursory autopsy in the parlor of the Borden home on the day of the murder. On the left side of the body, more importantly the head and face, the alienists noted that Andrew Borden suffered numerous, quote, incised wounds and one contused wound penetrating the brain, end quote. Andrew suffered 11 wounds in all. Abby suffered 18 wounds to the skull. Lizzie's story changed often and her facts became convoluted. Even when she appeared at the inquest, her facts seemed altered to fit her narrative of the story. 2 days after the murders, stories circulated that Lizzie may have planned the murders. Most significantly, Eli Bentz, a clerk at S.R. Smith's drugstore in Fall River, told police that Lizzie visited the store the day before the murder and attempted to purchase prussic acid, a deadly poison. Bentz claimed that Lizzie wanted the poison to clean a sealskin coat. Even though evidence mounted that Lizzie may be a murderess, crowds of people came to her defense, as evidenced in this opinion from the Boston Herald of August 10th. From the consensus of opinion it can be said, in Lizzie Borden's life there is not one unmaidenly nor a single deliberately unkind act. Because of the trauma that Lizzie allegedly experienced as a result of the murders, Dr. Bowen prescribed morphine that sedated her considerably. At the inquest, Lizzie answered some questions and refused to answer others. Her rendition of the facts confused and confounded authorities, and even the district attorney at the time became aggressive and confrontational in his quest for the truth. Due to her uncertainty and the authorities' dissatisfaction with her rendition of the events on the day of the murder, District Attorney Hosea Knowlton served Lizzie with a warrant for her arrest on August 11, 1892, and jailed her. A grand jury convened on November 7th, and on December 2nd, after considering all the evidence, indicted Lizzie Borden. She would stand trial for the murders of Andrew and Abby Borden. The community was shocked that authorities would charge a genteel woman in Victorian society for such violent murders. Fall River, Massachusetts made no accommodations for females in their jail, so authorities moved Lizzie from Fall River to Taunton, Massachusetts until the trial. After her incarceration in August, women's groups and others came to her defense. It was truly a case of where undue influences may have had an effect on the outcome. In this particular case, the press played an important part in the prosecution of the case due to the social mores of the time. Many asked how could a sweet, demure woman of Lizzie's standing commit such horrendous crimes. The trial began on the hot and sticky day of June 5, 1893, at the Bristol County Courthouse located in New Bedford, Massachusetts. The prosecution was represented by District Attorney Knowlton and future United States Supreme Court Justice William H. Moody. Lizzie was represented by what some historians have called the 19th century, quote, dream team, end quote. The defense consisted of Andrew Jennings, the Borden family attorney, and Melvin O. Adams, the former Massachusetts state governor. 5 days before the Borden trial, another axe murder occurred in Fall River. Once the murder was solved, it was determined that the person responsible was not in Fall River at the time of the Borden murders. Points of contention arose at the trial. One of them was the hatchet head found in the basement. The prosecution contended that the hatchet handle had been cut off by the murderer because it was covered in blood. Contradictory stories emerged between two police officers who claimed to have found the handle. They did not produce the said handle during the trial. Another point of contention came from Miss Alice Manley Russell. Miss Russell testified that she witnessed Lizzie Borden burning a dress on the kitchen stove on August 8, 1892, 4 days after the murder. Lizzie stated to Russell that the dress had been ruined when she brushed paint on it. Russell failed to testify as to whether the substance covered the dress appeared to have been blood. This fact was substantiated by the painter himself, but one question remained about the garment. Where was this dress at the time the police searched the house? Another important point of dispute came when the prosecution questioned Lizzie's timeline regarding her presence at the residence. Maggie Sullivan testified that she entered the second floor of the home at approximately 10:50 a.m., and she left Lizzie and Andrew Borden on the first floor at that time. Lizzie stated to several people that she went into the barn and did not go back into the house for 20 or 30 minutes. Hyman Lubinsky testified that he witnessed Lizzie leaving the barn at approximately 11:03 a.m. This testimony was substantiated with another witness named Charles Gardner. On the first day of the trial, unbeknownst to the bulk of the people in the gallery, the heads of the murder victims had been removed by the coroner immediately after the burial for an analysis of the wounds after the skin had been removed. Prosecutor Moody, in a dramatic gesture, threw a dress upon the prosecution table, knocking to the floor a bag that contained the skulls. Whether Moody did this on purpose or not has become a matter of conjecture to historians and researchers of the case. Obviously, the skulls were extracted to demonstrate the extent of the wounds to the heads of the victims, and the hatchet purported to be the murder weapon fit into the wounds with some precision. When the skulls fell out of the bag, Lizzie swooned, almost as if on cue. Also at this time, the judges ruled that the prussic acid purchasing incident would not be admitted, being too far removed in time. The exposure of the skulls and Lizzie's reaction to the exposure convinced some that she may have been coached. Her wardrobe and mannerisms during the course of the trial indicated a certain morbid choreography. Lizzie appeared as the genteel Victorian female who was wrongly accused of the crime that her manners and upbringing deemed impossible. D.A. Knowlton tried to use Lizzie's inquest testimony against her at the trial, but technically, Lizzie was under arrest at the inquest and did not enjoy the benefit of counsel at the time. Therefore, the court ruled that the statements at the inquest could not be used against her at the trial. This stood as a great blow to the prosecution. Despite the vast array of witnesses that were paraded in front of the jury, the trial lasted approximately 15 days, and most of the evidence was circumstantial and presented reasonable doubt as to Lizzie's guilt. Although some of the testimony and evidence produced swoons from the gentler sex in the gallery, nothing pointed conclusively to Lizzie as the murderer. At the end of the trial, when the jury was to deliberate, Associate Justice Justin Dewey, one of the 3 justices appointed to the court circuit and who had heard the Borden trial, gave a summary of the case to the jury that appeared to favor the defense. Justice Dewey cited Lizzie's character and the family name, while at the same time questioning the prosecution's experts. The jury then deliberated for an hour and a half before they returned the verdict. They found Lizzie Borden not guilty of the murders of Andrew and Abby Borden. In fact, the jury made a very quick decision, but waited an hour before they announced the decision, making it appear that they took a long time to deliberate the verdict. Before the verdict was announced, the court requested whether she had anything to say before a sentence was pronounced, and Lizzie stated confidently, quote,
I am innocent. I let my counsel speak for me.
Those supporting Lizzie cheered when the verdict was announced. Now finally, she and Emma would be able to enjoy their father's fortune and would enjoy the life they felt they should have enjoyed and not living as a miser like their father. But just because a jury acquitted her did not mean that Fall River society would accept Lizzie back with open arms. The women of Fall River shunned and ostracized her, but Lizzie paid them no mind. Since the death of her father, she could live the life she always wanted. 6 months after the murder, Lizzie and Emma purchased a house on, quote, the Hill, end quote, the more affluent part of Fall River, where Lizzie named the mansion, quote, Maplecroft, end quote. Lizzie also changed her name, not officially though, to, quote, Lisbeth Andrew Borden, end quote, possibly an attempt to escape the dark cloud of being a murderess. Feeling the freedom that her newfound wealth had brought her, Lizzie traveled extensively to places such as Boston, Washington, D.C., and New York. On one of her travels to Boston in 1904, she met an actress by the name of Nance O'Neill, whose real name was Gertrude Lamson. The 2 women grew very close, and rumors began to fly that they were engaged in a lesbian relationship. Lizzie held parties at Maplecroft, which included the theater troupe to which O'Neill belonged. In a small town such as Fall River, actresses and members of the theater held a social standing slightly above prostitutes. Historians have theorized that this is the argument that Lizzie and Emma engaged in. After this argument, Emma moved from Maplecroft and left Lizzie alone. The 2 would never speak to each other again. Lizzie periodically made the news and was even accused of stealing some porcelain paintings from a gallery in Fall River, but she settled the matter before it could escalate. In 1927, Lizzie Borden died from pneumonia. Emma died 9 days later. In Lizzie's will, she left $30,000 to the Fall River Humane Society, demonstrating that her love of animals would transcend her death. Lizzie also took care of her servants generously, but left Emma nothing. A few years after her death, Lizzie's nurse who cared for her after her gallbladder surgery stated that Lizzie made a confession that she had a boyfriend whom Andrew Borden despised. The nurse, Ruby Cameron, stated that the boyfriend, according to Lizzie, committed the murders. This story has never been corroborated. Other than Andrew Borden's wealth, not much as far as motive has been examined over the years as to why Lizzie Borden would commit such horrendous acts. Over the last 20 years, though, a theory explaining the destruction of Andrew Borden's face materialized with accusations of incest between the elder Borden and his natural daughters. The murderer exhibited unequaled rage with the murder of Andrew, and this is telling of a characteristic of the murderer. However, there is no other evidence to support this assertion. In 1997, students at the Stanford Law School decided to put Lizzie Borden on trial once again, with the audience to the event acting as the jury. And again, they found her not guilty. Former U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor presided over the trial. Many assumptions have occurred over the years as to the true nature of the Borden murders. Some say that Lizzie and Maggie Sullivan committed the murders on their own and that these two carried on a scandalous affair until Abby discovered them together. Some historians state that John Morse murdered Andrew and Abby Borden due to some shady business dealings. One thing is certain, especially when it comes to Andrew's death. He was alive when Lizzie went to the barn and was dead upon her return. Who was in the house? Who beside Lizzie had a motive? Did Emma resort to violence to, quote, save, end quote, her younger sister? Lizzie never reacted to the discovery of her father's body in a way typical of 19th century Moors. Others watching the case from the outside couldn't believe that Lizzie never fainted as a genteel woman at the sight of such a horrific spectacle. There have been several portrayals of the famous Borden case over the years. In fact, in 1975, Elizabeth Montgomery played Lizzie Borden in The Legend of Lizzie Borden. Although there were no real earth-shattering facts as to the details of the crime, not many watching the show were aware that Elizabeth Montgomery actually portrayed her distant cousin, 6 times removed. Montgomery was related to Lizzie Borden, and her portrayal of the ancestor proved quite chilling. In 2017, a movie entitled Lizzie was released. A homoerotic theme pervaded throughout the production, blurring any serious consideration of the crime itself or who may have actually committed the offense. On another note, on behalf of True Crime Man's Dark Imagination, I would like to personally thank all of our subscribers. You really make this worthwhile. Until next time. True Crime Man's Dark Imagination can also be found at Facebook at www.facebook.com/historyguy/ and Twitter at historyguy63. If you like what you saw, please like and subscribe and tell your friends about us as well. Thank you very much.